Hi, this video will discuss a marginal revenue curve for a monopolist and compare this monopolist marginal revenue with the competitive industry marginal revenue. And we will see that the monopolist marginal revenue is different from the demand. So what is marginal revenue? It's the additional revenue from producing one more unit. Let's calculate this additional revenue from one more unit with an example for a monopolist. Calculate their marginal revenue. So suppose this monopolist had a given price and quantity, so a given demand, and at the price of 5, nothing is demanded. When the price is 4, 1 is sold, 3, 2 are sold, and at $2, 3 are sold. So multiplying P and Q, you get this total revenue column. So marginal revenue then will be the difference of total revenue as you increase quantity by 1. And this initial first quantity that's sold, it's the same as the price in MR. That's the only spot that they'll be the same. And when your second item is sold, your total revenue grows by 2. So it's a positive 2 for MR. And so note here that the MR, which is 2, okay, the MR here of 2, is smaller than the price. And this will continue throughout for the monopolist marginal revenue curve. When the third one is sold, the total revenue doesn't change. It stays at $6. So here now, since total revenue doesn't change, MR is 0. But compare that with a positive price of 2. So price will always be bigger than MR for a monopolist. This is different from before for a competitive firm where P and MR were the same. If a corn grower was selling corn for $1.55 a bushel, then every time they produced another bushel of corn, they got a price of $1.55 or an MR of $1.55. That doesn't happen anymore for a monopolist. Price is bigger than MR. And more generally, the MR curve will lie inside the demand. It will be steeper than the demand. If you have a linear demand, MR will be twice as steep. So let's more formally now define marginal revenue. So here's a definition for total revenue, price times quantity. Marginal revenue is the change in revenue from selling one more unit. Or MR more formally is this change in TR over change in Q. And if you're changing Q, like that previous example, you were selling one more each time, then you can find MR simply as since you're dividing by change in Q, which is 1, then MR would simply just be the change in total revenue, or the additional revenue from selling one more. So there's your MR definition. Now, let's define something for you. Marginal revenue differs from a competitive firm because a monopoly faces a downward sloping demand curve, whereas unlike a competitive firm, which has a horizontal demand curve. So that's why the MR curve is going to lie inside or below the demand curve at every possible quantity. So here's the image we have in mind. For a competitive firm, they face a horizontal demand. That cotton grower or soybean producer can produce as many as they want at that given market price without impacting the market demand. So that's why P and MR are the same for the competitive firm. But if we're talking a monopolist, if they want to sell more, if you're the only seller, you've got to lower the price to sell more. And that's why MR and price for the monopolist are not the same. So for example, suppose your price is here at P1 and you're selling Q units of the item. You're right there. And when you want to sell another unit of output, what do you have to do? Well, you've got to lower your price to sell more. You can't just magically sell another one at P1. So the monopolist has to lower their price. And it's that price reduction that causes price and MR to be different. Because you got to lower your price to attract another sale, you gain area B, that's new revenue for you, but you lose area C for the monopolist. So the monopolist then, in net, to determine how MR changed, they need to add B but subtract C. Whereas over here for the competitive firm, you want to sell another one? We'll sell another one. The price doesn't change. You just simply gain B. That's why P and MR are the same. But over here, this is called an output effect, which increases revenue, causes revenue to go up because you're selling more. But the price effect, you're losing this area because you got to drop your price for your previously buyers who were paying this higher price P1. Now they get a discount. They get to save some money. So this is P2. So that's why the quantity effect increases revenue, the price effect decreases revenue. But in net, that's why the price is going to be bigger than the marginal revenue. So for a monopolist to increase its output by the change in Q, here in this image, we're changing output, this is our change in Q, then it's got to lower the price per unit by this change in P over change in Q. Here, change in P over change in Q, this is the slope of the demand curve. And this is the slope of demand. By lowering the price, the monopolist will lose out on this slope, change in P over change in Q, times Q. Because previously it was selling Q units, and so this change in P over change in Q, this is area C. It loses out on that area. So there is a price effect where previously you were selling the items at a higher price. This is the price effect that reduces revenue, and you also have a output effect. You're going to sell another unit of output at that new price P. So this will increase your revenue. That increase in revenue here is seen by area B. This is the quantity effect. This is the price effect. This area C. So then the monopolist marginal revenue is going to be found as follows. It's going to equal to the P plus this P is our output effect, and this is our price effect, change in P over change in Q times Q. So that's a quick overview of how you find marginal revenue. Check out the second video to work an example or two of this marginal revenue calculation.